Remember when NXT call-ups used to be fun? Yeah, we looked forward to them. Paige was there and Kevin Owens was there. Good times, good times. Anyway, those good times didn't last, and now call-ups are less like the transition from minor league baseball to major league baseball, and more like NXT stars are going into witness protection, complete with new identity, wardrobe, and taste in music. Needless to say, there have been many flops on the main roster coming out of NXT through no fault of the wrestlers, but that got me thinking about who the biggest main roster flops were in the days before WWE decided to spit on NXT's Peach Cobbler. And just to clarify, rather than spend a whole 744 seconds talking about every Nathan Jones, Mason Ryan, and Vladimir Kozlov to have a cup of coffee in the Fed, I'll be using this time to focus on those who have shown before or since that they have had the ability to be major stars before WWE bollocks it up. A tale as old as time. I'm Tempest, hailing from partsFUNknown, and these are the 10 biggest main roster flops before NXT. Are you ready for your main roster call-up? Well, if you are, make sure that it's not a flop by subscribing to partsFUNknown. That's really bad segue. I'm really trying at these things. Just subscribe. Maybe then at some point I'll be able to stop doing them. Number 10, the entire Spirit Squad. So that's it. What? We some kind of Spirit Squad. What better way to start off a list of WWE completely bungling young talent than with a 5-for-1 special? Kenny, Johnny, Mitch, Ziggy, and Mikey were 5 of Ohio Valley Wrestling's best when they hit the road dressed as a sitcom dance group, the halftime dance crew of the National Lacrosse League Chicago Shamrocks. One of WWE's most infamous gimmicks, the Spirit Squad, unfortunately killed the careers of some of WWE's best prospects. Johnny Jeter, at 19 years old, packed everything he owned in the trunk of his car and drove from San Diego to Louisville and waited tables at Chili's to pay for wrestling school. Considered by OVW management to be Ricky Morton for the 21st century, Johnny joined Task Force Flex over here, and within a year he had quit the business. Suddenly, Butch doesn't look that bad. Number 9, Doug Basham. Doug Basham does not get brought up nearly enough in conversations of the best real-life names turned ring names. He sounds like a cartoon tough man from Looney Tunes or something. It's such an awesome wrestling name, and it was befitting of the man himself. Yes, the Basham Masham robot was considered to be another of OVW's top prospects as one of the first class of students at the OVW school. A cocky top heel with long blonde hair, Basham went on the road, and just in case you needed a reminder that the WWE creative process has always been a room of monkeys on typewriters, they had him shave his head bald just to see what it would look like. You know, there's this wonderful thing called imagination. Perhaps you can give it a try. You need a tutorial from SpongeBob? Look at him do the thing. Basham made his way to the main roster for realsies in 2003 with fake brother Danny, and well, they were a team in the 2000s. It went about as well as you would expect. They were part of JBL's cabinet. That's notable, I guess. But by the end, Doug was hanging out solo on Velocity, calling himself the Bash Man. You guys remember the Bash Man? I think the Bash Man 2 just got announced for 2024. Number 8, Slam Master Jay. You would never know that known Festus handler and attempted white hip-hop something or other, Jesse Slam Master Jay Jr., was actually a second-generation wrestler. Ray Gordy, son of fabulous Freebirds legend Terry Gordy, made his SmackDown debut in 2007 along noted sex man Segs Ferguson. Jesse and Festus probably have some sort of nostalgia working in their favor at this point, but man, this really was quite an idea, wasn't it? Now, granted, during his time in Deep South Wrestling, Jesse wrestled as Ray Jeezy, a takeoff on real rapper Jeezy. That's certainly bonkers. And then Cousin Ray, who was a hillbilly, so it's not like his developmental gimmicks were anything to go by. But after CM Punk sobered up the world's horniest sleeper agent, Jesse once again looked to hip them hops, calling himself Slam Master Jay and hanging out with Crime Time. I don't know, what's wrong with the story of son of legendary wrestler doing his best to honor his father's legacy? You know the Cody story? I like that story. You can do it with more than one person too. Number 7, Trent Beretta. In the years since Trent Beretta left WWE in 2013, he has been as solidly consistent as any of his peers. He's been a standout in New Japan, Ring of Honor, PWG, and AEW. The man can go, and he gets bonus points for introducing the wrestling world to Sue. The world needs more Sue. For as much of a standout as Trent has been everywhere else he's gone, he was never given the chance in WWE. Debuting on ECW with Kalen Croft as the Dude Busters, a team that the Force tells me Luke Owen would have been a fan of, the team didn't last more than a year before Croft was released. The only time WWE tried to give Trent anything was when he randomly beat Drew McIntyre on SmackDown in January of 2011, which unsurprisingly no one knew how to react to because no one watching SmackDown in 2011 knows enough about Trent Beretta to care about a win over pre-buff Drew McIntyre. WWE then looked at his lack of reaction and went, oh well. And that was the tale of Trent Beretta's main roster push. I would say it's about the friends we made along the way, but Trent's best friends came later in the story. Number 6, Vance Archer. With a name like an especially tall vampire, Vance Archer was the WWE iteration of the man better known as Lance Archer, or perhaps Lance Hoyt if you're one of them TNA diehards. Granted, Archer has aged like a fine wine, properly coming into his own as an in-ring performer in the last 3 years. Working with the greats in New Japan will do that to you, but working with the folks in FCW and WWECW, maybe not so much. Vance's WWE run was extremely dull, at one point teaming with Kurt Hawkins and beating Matt Hardy and Christian. That's almost an AEW match. It does strike me as odd every time a big, tall, decently talented wrestler walks through WWE's doors only to be turned away. Did you guys miss the memo? He's big! I thought you loved that. Vance Archer didn't last long in WWE, being released only a year and a half into his deal. Thankfully, he walked right into New Japan, where he was adopted by the fine folks at Suzuki-gun. Number 5, Braden Walker. He was a superstar who captured the imagination and rebellious spirit of a couple of weeks in late July, a name synonymous with having matches with Armando Estrada and that other guy he had a match with, and talking with Matt Hardy backstage. Knock knock, who's there? Braden Walker, and I'm gonna knock your brains out. All courtesy of the 3-disc Braden Walker DVD set. Copyright trademark that one guy who made the awesome YouTube video like 14 years ago. The old ages of YouTube. Anywho, much like the last entry, WWE was just whipping their big silly dicks around whenever TNA stars had the audacity to sign with them in the 2000s. Lance Hoyt? Nothing. Chris Harris? Knock knock. Braden Walker's coming to knock your brains out. Like, this was America's Most Wanted, partner of James Storm, Chris Harris. He shows up for a few weeks on ECW, then steps into the ether never to be seen again. I started to write, imagine if this happened these days, and then I realized that's how this list started in the first place, and maybe this company has always been this way after all. Number 4, Scotty Goldman. Boy, you were if you were an indie star in the 2000s looking to sign with WWE. A few were able to get by, but for every Daniel Bryan, you unfortunately had a Scotty Goldman, the much lesser known former alias of AEW star and independent wrestling legend Colt Cabana. Another dude who is like super talented and could be a real addition to your roster, especially as stars like Triple H, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Edge, and Batista were starting to take more time off. But no, rather Colt Cabana debuted as Scotty Goldman and lost to the Brian Kendrick in August of 2008. He then lost to the Great Khali and lost a few battle royals before being killed by Umaga in his final WWE match. Unless you count his dark match with Wade Barrett in 2011, but give me a break, you cheeky sausages, I'm the fact checker here. But those 6 matches made up for the entirety of Colt Cabana's WWE run. Thankfully, Colt's ability to market himself and his podcast would be his biggest contribution to the business, truly pioneering a wave of indie wrestlers able to make a full-time living without needing to be signed to a major promotion. Number 3, Evan Bourne. Another of those indie stars that signed with WWE during the wrong time frame. The Indies' Matt Sydal was one of the best high flyers of that scene, and was still pretty awesome as WWE's Evan Bourne, even if the company was determined to keep him super glued to the floor as they made him reach for that brass ring. A nice shooting star press went a long way in 2008, which earned Bourne a lot of points with the audience, but he was beaten like a drum for the vast majority of his WWE tenure, only getting the occasional surprise win here and there, like at Fatal 4-Way beating Chris Jericho. He won the tag titles with Kofi Kingston in 2011, but it was the WWE tag titles in 2011, and the less said about that the better. But it was also right at the end of his run, and their team was called Air Boom, and I'd simply rather neuralize myself, thank you. I have a lot of really fond memories of Evan Bourne, and he definitely has more incredible moments than others on this list, but at the same time the best one is him getting hit with another dude's finish. You know the one. Matt Sydal has continued to be insanely talented everywhere he's worked, which has never really been surprising. He's a flippy man. Look at him do his flippy flips. Wee. Number 2, Nick Dinsmore. There's probably a bunch of people listening to this list that are hearing the name Nick Dinsmore for the first time. And my good friends, that is because WWE is a place where they will look at a guy named Nick Dinsmore and say, that's not the name of a star, we need to call him Eugene. There is probably a good deal of nostalgia around the Eugene character. He has some good segments, like that musical chairs bit, that's a banger. However, I cannot look at the act of taking Nick Dinsmore, a very talented technical wrestler who was having great 20-minute battles with Chris Benoit and OVW, and giving him the character character of Eugene. I want these lists to be a fun, happy time with jokes and laughs and good times and happy memories, but this entry is just so goddamn sad. I know we as a society have evolved a lot in these last 2 decades, but that also just sounds like an excuse for people to get away with being gross, and the Eugene character was very gross for a multitude of obvious reasons. Aside from being among the most distasteful characters WWE has ever put on screen, and think of the ground that covers, but it effectively killed the career of the man himself, Nick Dinsmore, as no one could believably bring him into their promotions after being tainted with such an awful gimmick. I hope he got paid a lot of money. He damn sure deserved it. And number 1, Ultimo Dragon. Had Ultimo Dragon wrestled on bigger stages more consistently and not had his arm injury derail his career, I think he would get a lot more talk in conversations of the best junior heavyweights of all time. We'll never know for sure, but his run in WWE sure didn't help his position. Ultimo Dragon had spent the 90s being one of the best wrestlers in the world, training with New Japan before traveling to Mexico and WCW, along the way having some of Jericho's best matches, and I'm not just saying that, he'll tell you that himself. He'd hurt his arm and a botched surgery left him with nerve damage that would need to be corrected years later before signing with WWE. They had hoped that he could rival the impact of the signing of Rey Mysterio, who they had brought in a year earlier, only I seem to recall Rey jumping off of a steel cage his first night in the company and facing Kurt Angle at SummerSlam. And for Dragon, it was, Instead, Dragon's WWE run is best known for him falling down at WrestleMania 20, and I can't help but die inside and try to smile through my tears as I say that. WWE never gave Ultimo Dragon the chance to get over, which unfortunately is the case with virtually every main roster flop this century. But in Ultimo Dragon's case, it is that much more heartbreaking because he could have been on Rey Mysterio's level. He could be in the top tier with the Jushin Thunder Ligers and Rey Mysterios and Dynamite Kids of the world, but unfortunately, he'll have to settle for just being number 1 on a list like this. And I mean, yeah, being one of the best goddamn wrestlers of all time is a bigger accomplishment than this list, if only by slightly. And that's our list. If you're as frustrated with WWE's call-up practices as we are, well, just come subscribe to partsFUNknown and we can all join in on the hate together. In the meantime, make sure to like this video, leave a comment if you liked it, and share it around with your friends. Maybe they'll enjoy it too. And if they do, tell them to subscribe too. The more the merrier.